All right, let us start with talk about conformity. And conformity in this chapter, you'll see three of the most famous social psychology experiments in one chapter, if that is not quite something. So let us start and get right into it. So conformity is kind of like the somewhat mildest form of social influence. And it's all about applying or complying with rules, following the norms that are set by our society, by the situation I am, by the group I belong to. So everyone has some kind of, every social interactions has underlying certain norms. And norms are, society norms are nothing else but rules to behave. Okay. So here you can even see some, like a contrast that's very obvious there. On the left hand, there's a person wearing a suit, and you feel like, oh, you're such a conformist. Look at you, all corporate. And on the right hand, we might feel like, oh, look at these white people. They just kind of reject every norm there is. They live whatever. However they want to be, rejecting all society norms. But I think it's almost impossible to get away from social norms. You can see the punks on the right. Two of them have basically exactly the same haircut. They have all basically the same shoes. They all have basically the same jacket. They look very much the same. I often feel that punks, when they kind of leave all conformity behind, get more orthodox, more conformist than we do, because they have a very certain set of rules that you have to follow. You have to like a certain style of even writing, of talking, of a job that you can't have, and so forth. So there are a lot of norms once you become a punk. And so similar, not just in punks, you can see it as an extreme example, is even if you're trying to flee norms, if you're trying to get away from these norms, it's almost impossible to do so. Every situation kind of tells us how we should behave and what we should say and in which manner, even what we should think and feel. I think in the beginning, in the introduction, I talked a little bit about Garfinkel's social breaching experiments, right? Where he basically asks people to behave in ways that violate the rules. So in one experiment, he asked his subjects, or his students actually, to go home and behave as if they were a lodger in their own home, right? So the students would become extremely polite to their parents, and they would say, thank you, oh yes, that's very kind of you. If I may retire now, then I would like to retire now in my room. And it would be lovely if I could have breakfast at 8 o'clock tomorrow in the morning. And the parents were bewildered, outraged, concerned, and so forth. So they kind of, by behaving like more politely, by behaving more like a lodger rather than a son or a daughter, they kind of unraveled the social norms that underlie these interactions, right? And thereby kind of showing us a little bit how powerful they are, how much we rely on these norms when we interact with each other. So how are social norms formed? There's a famous experiment by Mustafa Sharif, and he takes advantage of the following visual illusion. So if you're in a dark room and you see nothing but a white point, at some point, or a white dot, at some point that circle will start to move, even though it actually doesn't move. So you will see something like this, and we'll move a little bit to one side, and then it might even move a little bit to the other side. And this is due to various reasons. We never stand still, our eyes never stand still, and so forth. So all of these become, for all of us, these dots would get moving. So if I would ask you, is this dot moving or not, you're more likely to say yes than no, even though in actuality it doesn't move. But now you can see that what happens if you do it in a group. What happens if there are 3 or 4 people in the group, and now I basically ask each and every round, like how many inches, here there's an American study, how many inches did the dot move? So maybe participant 1 says 1, and then 2, and then 8. So we have 3 participants. There are 2 of them are somewhat together. The third one is really far away from them. But what you can see over the rounds, over the sessions, that people become more and more aligned, okay? So that what they report seeing, what they feel they're seeing, what they think they're seeing becomes at some point one. There's an ambiguous situation, and we kind of look to the others to figure out what is actually going on. And that helps us to reduce the uncertainty. So this is somewhat, I think I might have forgotten to put something here on the slide. But the key point here is that Sharif studies show us basically that we have social norms in order to reduce uncertainty. Remember the previous session here is that like one of the key aspects we need to deal with as human beings is to kind of reduce the inherent uncertainty that is that comes with our lives. And one powerful way to reduce social uncertainty are norms. They kind of tell us how we should behave, and thereby whenever we are in an uncertain situation, we also look to others. We're more open to social influence. So in an ambiguous situation where there is in one way, because all of the dot did not move, that was the truth, right? But for us in our perceptions, there's no real truth. For us, it looks like that moves. Then we look especially towards the influence of others. But then at some point in the 50s, Solomon Asch, in a really famous experiment you might already know, asked, what happens if I have an objective truth? And if the group basically runs counter to the objective truth. So here on the left you see the X, and the X you are asked to do to judge whether one of the three ones here, A, B, or C, match in length the X one. So I think it's very obvious if you do that B matches X. And I think if you do it on your own, about on 94% of the trials, participants can basically name the correct the line. So it's a task that has an objective truth. B is objectively correct. It's not that hard. People are very good at doing it. But what now if you do it with a bunch of other people? So this is actually a photo. Sorry for it's a little bit blurry from the original study. So let's imagine that you would be this participant here, and you do this with many other people. What you don't know, and here this is kind of where the lines are. What you don't know is that all of these people here, they're all part of the experiment. They're all so-called confederates, and 12 times out of the 15 times per round, they say something wrong. So let's imagine you see this, you say like, okay, I think it's clearly B. You see you want to say B, but then you hear everyone else saying C. What do you do, right? This is obviously wrong. This can't be C. You see that it's not C. Yet, what will you say? So in 37% of the cases, we see a group conformity effect. We see that the participant agrees with the group, even though they know that this must be wrong. They see that it must be wrong. So there is even in objectively evaluable positions or situations, we look for the group for influence. We look around us and see like, what are the others saying? And we want to fit into this group. We want to be part of that, right? I think when the first time when after the lockdown, after the COVID pandemic, after the first lockdown, I was the only person in the gym that was wearing a mask. Nobody else was wearing a mask. So the second time I didn't wear a mask because I did not want to be the odd one out, the misfit. And that is a really powerful motivation for us to conform to social norms we want to fit in and be accepted by the group.